Hi guys, welcome to the third lesson of the How to Use Photoshop Actions course. My name is Daniel and this course is brought to you by PS Actions Club. So, in the last lesson we went over layer masks, okay? Really useful. I use them on all of my actions, probably half of the time. I use them daily, really important. But there is something that is perhaps even more important than layer masks, and that is these three key things: your blend modes, your opacity, and your fill. Now, if you were doing graphic design or something like that, you'd know all about fill. It's so important. In the case of photo editing for photography, we don't really use it as much. So I'm just going to say to you, don't worry about that when you're using actions, okay? What you want to really pay attention to is the opacity and the blend modes. So what I've done here is I've loaded in one of the top light actions from our lighting set. Now I've turned the visibility off, but I'll turn that back on for you now. And you can see it's basically added a very gentle light source from the top of the photo down. Now in this particular photo it works because you can see where the lighting naturally is. But even so, it's washed out that photo a little bit, right? So obviously we could use the layer masks as we did before and adjust the brush settings so that we could make it really gentle to take away some of that. Or we could do something with the opacity. So with the opacity, currently at 100% because that's default and we've left all of our actions at 100% by default. Or we could change it to 50% and you can see all of a sudden that it's not quite as harsh of an effect. It's more gentle. That looks better. So we can leave that at 50%, and obviously it's a scale between 1 to 100, and you can use any of those. So you can use which one you like. You can experiment with it. And opacity is really useful for that. It's useful because it lightens that particular layer that you're changing the opacity on. So we're lightening, in essence, reducing the visibility of that top light action. As for blending modes, you can see here that it's currently set to pass through. When it comes to actions, all of our actions are default set to pass through, okay? And that's at the very top there. Normal, you can see that it's taken that layer and it's basically ignored the opacity change that we've done. Now if you go to any one of these, down here you can see screen has changed that a little bit, but mainly overlay, soft light and hard light are the ones that you really want to play around with this particular action. So we can have it on overlay. Now if we put that back to pass through, you can see the white at the top. With overlay, it's used some of those natural colors in there and made this photo look more natural. So we've set the opacity to 50% and we've put a blending mode of overlay on it because in this particular case that works. Different things are going to work on different actions for different photos, of course, but it's important for you to know that those two things are there. Opacity you'll be using most of the time, whereas blending modes you won't be using all the time. Some actions, for example, if it's just changing the colors, blending modes aren't really going to have as much of an effect. But for lighting and stuff, blending modes are really, really useful, and that's why I wanted to use a lighting action and show you this effect. So that's basically all you need to know about blending modes, opacity and fill. Fill is more useful for graphic designers than like photo editors and photographers and stuff. Opacity is really important. You'll be using it all the time on your actions. And the blending modes, you can play around with them. You can find loads of instructions out there for what each one specifically does. But when it comes to photo editing and stuff, most of the time, like I said, you're only going to be using a handful of them anyway. So just play around with them on particular images and bear in mind that different effects you're using may benefit from a blending mode or not. Okay? So the next lesson, we're going to be going over some brush tips so that we can go back to what we were talking about with layer masks before and see how we can change our layer masks by changing the settings of our brush. Okay, I hope you found the lesson on blending and fill and opacity in lightning. If there's any questions you have, just leave them in the comments. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. And see you in the next lesson. Thanks.